It's easy to get lost. This is The Revenue Maze, and I'm Valerie Cobb. Join me as we navigate the halls, dead ends, and U-turns on our path towards upward growth trajectory. The Revenue Maze is sponsored by Lodestar URY, guidance and execution through fractional revenue leadership, uncovering hidden revenue streams, and empowering small business growth through process-driven sales. Welcome, everybody, to the Revenue Maze today. I'm super excited about our guest today, and he has built a business with over 1 million signups, recipient of the coveted Red Herring Top 100 Europe in 2021, has spent 2 decades in technology and finance staffing, bless your heart, lived and worked in 3 continents, co-founder and CEO at worker.io. Welcome, Annil Chandel.
Thanks, Valerie. I tell you what, when people do an introduction, it always makes me a little bit curious, how big is the name behind the brand and the person? But no, thank you. It's a very humbling introduction. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. And it's great to be on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. But we always start the show exactly the same all the time. All right. So we have to start it with, what is one thing that you can tell the audience that will help them get out of the revenue maze?
You know what? It was a great question. Always a difficult one when you're trying to just succinctly put something together. And I'm taking this from our recent, I guess, learnings and where we are in our business at the moment. And it's as simple as keep it simple. And there's a very simple phraseology, that comes actually from the American Army, which is the KISS principle,
yes,
which is keep it stupid simple, or as they say, keep it simple stupid. But keep it simple, is really what it's all about. I think we overcomplicate this too often. And as soon as you start looking at it in a very simplistic form, you'll find the jigsaw pieces do actually start connecting together and paint this picture quite well. But we all get lost in that maze of how can we, when can we, how do we, and so on. So keep it simple.
Oh, and I laugh because we do say that and then we overcomplicate it, right? It's one of those things that it's like, okay, if you're going to keep it simple, and with what you're doing right now with Worker and all of that kind of stuff, you could really overcomplicate some of the things that are going on out there. And I personally struggle with that, all the time. It's like I have to write step by step, and then I'm like, oh, all these workflows, all these things, and then I have to dial it back afterwards. And so I take it completely from the complex, set it aside, and just go, okay, what do you remember? 1, 2, 3. How do you do this? Give us some examples. Help us out here.
Yeah, I don't think there's any sort of magic potion or pill to take to actually make this work. And as entrepreneurs and as startups, I guess we all try different things, and sometimes by luck, sometimes by process, sometimes just by opportunity, something will click. And I think often we complicate it because we believe that there's actually a lot more to do than just a very simple thing like taking the idea, moving that idea into, I guess, some sort of planning, so ideate and then plan, how you're going to take that forward, launch whatever that little idea is, and then just monitor it and measure it, and you know what works. And if it doesn't work, you tweak it and you go back and do the same. And it's just reiterating that. But often we start off with the idea, and as we're going through those steps, we overcomplicate them. We start adding new processes or sub projects into it or plans into it, and we try to then get to the same goal. And that's where often I think things fall apart. So we instinctively usually know what the steps are, but I think we overthink it, and then you overcomplicate it, and then it becomes very complex. And that's where you then have challenges, even to go back and, as you said, to go through the workflow and understand what it is that really works. And hands up, we've done it at Worker. When we first launched, back in 2018, and we were just ideating the concept of worker, we did it then. We started off with a very simple concept, which was to keep people connected and working together from anywhere. And then we started thinking about, how do I put virtual reality goggles on? How do I get into the metaverse and so on and so forth? But often it's stay with the simple idea of what you set out to do, because translating that into a revenue strategy is easier than all the new things that are happening. But you get lost. Sometimes you get carried away in doing something which everybody else is doing, or I want to be in that space, rather than focusing on what you actually started your journey with. So hence why I say, it's keep it simple, because we've been through this ourselves. And it's only recently, after this fantastic number of 1 million signups that we managed to attract to the business. It's a great number, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of noise in there, and there's a lot of cleansing that you have to do to actually really get down to the customers that count, the customers that are going to pay, and ultimately the ones that you can replicate and target again, with in other markets. So it's bringing it back to basics, and then taking that idea forward again.
Yeah. I have to admit, I completely struggle with that. And so it's a great reminder, because sometimes we whittle away even at our time because we spend so much time on it. And I laugh a little bit. You have a picture of Einstein behind you, which I love Einstein quotes. And people know, other guests know that this is not scripted, right? We kind of come up with what we're going to talk about, period. And, I probably can't quote it right, but I love the Einstein quote where he's like, if you had a problem, and it's summarizing, I would spend, 50 something minutes on the right question, what are we really solving for? And then about 5 minutes solving it, and it kind of goes around with that, because sometimes people just can't identify what is the simple problem, right? Then you can quickly go 1, 2, 3. And gosh, in the sales world, because I'm a fractional chief revenue officer, right? In the sales world, we tend, with all the AI and all the things that you've got to program, and RevOps has almost become its animal in and of itself, right? And so we run into that all the time. And another guest was talking about just product market fit. Boy, we can overcomplicate that too, can't we? So yeah,
you're right. I think if when you've come from a couple of decades of working in, I would say, the non-technical way of building sales funnels, it does really paint a really good perspective in terms of where we are now, because the buyer today is simple but complex, and I say that in sort of almost a contradictory manner, but it's simple because they're still a buyer, and as long as you provide them with the right product or service, they will obviously buy. It's complex because the buyer today doesn't just take your word for it. Yep. The buyer has the ability today to actually do many searches across the internet, look at testimonials, look at reviews, compare you, look on rating sites in terms of what others have actually benefited from your product. So they can do quite a lot of research. Whereas if you just were face to face with that buyer without any internet or any technology, the likelihood is the idea and the product or the service that you're selling, you could probably get them to buy into that fairly easily. So it becomes complex because you've got this noise of data and information, and the modern buyer has a lot more of this information to hand. So selling to that modern buyer does become a little bit harder. And we have to just make sure that we take that sale to them in a simplistic form so they know what they're getting, right? So that's the challenge, but there's always going to be a bit of bias if they've done some research or they're doing research post your conversation. So the idea is, how do you get to that point fairly quickly and then get them to sort of take it on? And there's, as I said, there's no magic to this, and there's no science to it. Sometimes it works quicker, sometimes it's slower, but you've got to keep on going towards that simple step of what's the problem, that you're trying to solve. And then you're gathering information from that person to ensure that your problem is actually solved, their problem is being solved by your solution or your service or product. But often what we're doing is we're selling like a widget, or we're selling like a product rather than actually solving their problem. So if you focus on solving their problem, they are more likely to want to actually buy your product or your service.
Yeah. One of my mentors says people buy for their reasons. And that's the complicated part, is understanding the problem or identifying the problem. They're not going to buy for your reasons. And so, and I don't know, you're probably familiar with the Challenger methodology, but Matt Dixon came out with a New York Times bestseller. It's coming out in another sort of, I think it's a month from now, but it talks about the challenges with the stall in people buying for everything that you're talking about, right? We've got to simplify it for them, but peeling away the layers of the onion of the psychology or whatever you want to call it behind how they buy, right? And training a bunch of sales team members, a lot of times, one will say, well, I buy for price, and another one will say, I buy for this, but that's not the way that their customers buy. That's just their opinion of it because of their emotional aspect with buying something, and so, you've gotten it down very simplistic, very simplistic.
I wouldn't say we got it down simplistically, but definitely the ideology, very much on where we are as in Worker right now, is where we've been very fortunate through the pandemic. In some ways, we've been very fortunate as a business because our solution was very specifically tied to enabling people to work from home. Actually, we'll work from anywhere was the original concept. But because everybody was stuck at home and they needed a way of connecting and not feeling isolated and wanted to still feel like they're part of the team, having their water cooler moments and all that type of stuff, we were ideally positioned to grow very fast. And we had a double-edged sword. We were not ready with product. We were still going from a prototype into the MVP stage as the pandemic emerged. But we said, look, it's great, that we can take this opportunity and we can either embrace it or we can, sort of shy away from it and say we're going to hide away and not do anything with it. And we did exactly that. We embraced it and said, we'll keep it free. We'll allow anybody and everybody to sign up to it. It gives us an advantage. We learn from the customers, to know where this product needed to go. But we signed up so many people, and we signed up across 100 countries. And then we had language challenges that we had to also address, so it's great. It's a great problem to have, but you hit the nail on the head. It's, there's a lot of parts of the sales cycle, but ultimately it comes down to, selling a solution for a problem. And if you can do that, then does your solution then tick the boxes for that particular problem, or is it just a fix of a problem in general? Now, this is often where we get a little bit lost, I think, and certainly from our experience, we had a solution which we first went to a very particular audience, which was the staffing and recruitment industry, only because myself and my co-founder Tim, we had come from that industry, so we had very good connects in that industry. So we went to sell the product to them. We realized very quickly, actually, that industry doesn't really want this as a solution. They're more inclined to have people in physical offices, as teams of salespeople working together to sell to their customers. And as time went on, industries started coming left, right, and center. And we got a little bit lost with that as well, because we were just almost going like that with the funnel the other way around. The funnel was getting bigger and bigger and bigger at the top. And what we really needed to focus on is, where's the sweet spot? Which is that customer? What is that ideal persona or customer that would want to buy this particular solution for their problem? And that's where it took us a bit more time. I don't think we're fully there yet. and I don't
Yeah.
think we've got it, but we certainly are finding a very niche now. So I think if you niche, it's easier to go out and target that audience, and then obviously get them to buy, because you're providing a very targeted solution to that audience as well. So solutioning rather than product selling, I think, is a very key part of it.
Yeah, no, it's great what you're saying. The work from anywhere crew, I kind of follow them as well, because gosh, back in 2004, we were work from anywhere. we did, and it was very difficult back then, right? Pre-iPhone, internet spotty at best, some of those things. We were living in the Cayman Islands, and it was interesting with little kids, and they've got these great groups for work from anywhere now for helping with homeschooling, or you could literally be on a boat for a week with your kids now, right? And work from anywhere. And one of the biggest challenges was feeling isolated. Even though we were actually physically working there, we were isolated away from family, friends, things like that, because you paid $1 million just to make a phone call back then, right? And a lot of people are like, well, that they don't experience that, right? But we had Cuban refugees pull up to our dock and a bunch of things while we were living there, and exciting things. But I do feel like the mental health portion of what you guys are doing is very important for this generation, but also the globalization is making it so people will work from anywhere. Sales has been working from anywhere on an airplane forever, right? But they didn't have the ability to do what you're talking about at Worker. And I love that. That's it creates less isolation for sure, collaboration, all of those things. A lot of people want those remote jobs now, just period. Anyway, COVID, yes, it probably brought it and helped it, but you save tons of money on fuel, carbon footprints that everybody's talking about, and if you can, that's the good part about it. So I love that you guys took that opportunity to help that entire workforce. How did you, even though COVID spawned it, people want to know, how did you get from, 10 years ago, how did you conceptualize Worker? What brought you to this point? I'm just curious.
I'm going to keep it simple. And look, in reality, we didn't really go out to conceptualize it in any particular way. It was a problem that we had in another business. So myself and Tim, we co-founded a remote first staffing and recruitment business back in 2015 now. And we started that, with the mindset of, we know talent is very global today. We know we tend to lose great people because once they reach a certain success, in their life, they don't particularly want to be traveling in and out of central city locations. And we realized we could still bring them back into a very good business and make them successful and have a successful business with people working from anywhere. And that's how we started off in 2015 in a remote first recruitment business. Now, bear in mind that myself and Tim coming from to myself 2 decades, Tim 3 decades, we've come from building businesses with offices in the most expensive locations. So, central London, be in New York City, be in Dubai. So we've come from building businesses in the most expensive central business districts around the world.
Yeah.
Now, there's a huge cost associated to that. And we transitioned from that to saying, well, we want to be remote first and people can work from anywhere. They can sit at home, they can be in a cafe, they can go on holiday, do a holiday and then work at the same time. So that's where we started as a business. And 2 years into the business, we realized as much as we had grown and we were starting to build a successful staffing and recruitment business, we felt there was an element of loneliness and feeling disconnected and not being able to do the things that we were so used to in a physical office. Yeah, just simply having a catch up in the morning when somebody comes in. Oh, did you watch the soccer last night? Or, did you watch that particular show, on TV? What do you think about it? Or talk about just some gossip that you've heard that's going on in the business, right? And these things, we underestimate how powerful they are for our businesses, because that's what instills the culture in a business. It's the people having those non-business conversations as well as those business element conversations that actually instills those values and those beliefs and the culture of the business. So we were missing that. And we thought, well, we can't suddenly move from a remote first model to take everybody into the office. So why don't we see if we can find a solution off the shelf? And that's how the journey started. We started looking for solutions off the shelf. We couldn't find anything apart from traditional video conferencing and video meeting applications. And then Tim and I sort of looked at each other and said, look, we both come from an IT background. We're both coders, by academia, but maybe we could see if we could build something. So we went looking to find a software development company. Lo and behold, we drew a concept on the back of a piece of paper, and we sort of held it up to this software development company, said, we want to replicate something like that. And all it was 10 rooms on a screen where we could actually see who's in that room on screen, and we could then move between those rooms on screen. And then we could have that feeling of actually knowing where people are, as well as being able to engage with them very instantly. So that's where the concept really started back in 2017 into 2018. And then when we had built this very, I use this phrase, Lego looking application for our own internal use, we switched it on, and everyone suddenly felt like they were connected and they knew each other, and we were sitting there and working away. In fact, we had a Christmas party, and this is a really interesting story. So we had a Christmas party, and obviously we all got together. We don't do that remotely, we get together and we got everybody together in a central location. And the one thing we realized, as much as we knew them as individuals in the business, and their characters were exactly what we anticipated. However, the only thing that we didn't realize was how tall or short they were, because this is all you ever see on a video meeting. So that just a little bit of an interesting fact there. But from there onwards, once we had switched it on in our business, we had clients and candidates coming in to have meetings with us, and people loved it. And that just naturally progressed on to us to say, I think we've got an opportunity to really take something to the masses and help them, because this has helped us in such a fantastic way here. And that's how the concept of Worker started in 2018, where we decided we've got a product, we've conceptualized it, we've got a prototype. Let's see if we can take it, to the marketplace and actually turn it into a commercially viable product. And it's taken us time. It's taken us nearly 3 years to get to having a product which is now ready to launch into the marketplace. But we've been very fortunate along that journey to have customers as well. And some of them were paying customers, even though we were still in a MVP stage. And it's this year where I guess the real key thing which we're discussing here is about building revenue and sales. It's only this year where we've really started analyzing very clearly, how we're going to go to market and what's going to be the approach, but keeping it simple again, and this changes and it evolves over time. But that's where we are now, and it's been a fantastic journey. We've loved every second of it, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat, even though it's been quite painful at times. Do it again any day of the week.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that journey. And I love that it hit almost at the time of the perfect storm, right? It's like, who had that crystal ball that says, oh my gosh, now, because I remember when I was working heavy equipment manufacturing, right? And I remember when COVID sort of hit, we were at ConExpo, and ConExpo, you may not know what that is, but it's a massive show in Las Vegas, right? And Bauma is out of Germany, and it's like twice the size of ConExpo. But, you have like 300,000 people attend, and just, you got Cat, spending like $3 million just on their booth alone, and so you just have this interesting thing, and they shut down the day, the last day of ConExpo. They shut down because of COVID. And in manufacturing, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, what do? We have all these workers, we have all this stuff. How do they actually adjust to that? And it was funny because we had teams, and they were a Microsoft shop and all that kind of stuff. So it was just like, well, the sales teams and the marketing and service, they were easy. You just flipped a switch, right? And you couldn't have done that years ago. You know, like we talked about.
Absolutely.
Still, I remember doing go-to meetings and trying to install software remotely and network it to 15 different computers through spotty at best back
Listen, we're giving our ages away now.
Yeah, I know, right. And so you just couldn't have known that would have been something that just it's like the perfect storm, because then all of the mental health and around that. So you understand the social aspect of it. And you know, we've been talking business the whole time, but people want to hear more about what is Annil. What does he do in his off time? What's his passion that he does in his off time when he's not sort of coding on a napkin or something, you know, that kind of thing? What do you love to do?
You know, I think I've been one very fortunate in being able to live and work in, you know, three continents around the world, and most recently it was India. India's always been very close. I'm an Indian origin person. My parents, you know, came from northern India, and having the ability to go and live and work in India really gave me a fantastic perspective, not just purely from a work angle, but also from a personal, social, almost a family, you know, angle. And it was fantastic for the kids as well. But just to sort of take it back to what you mentioned, I've been fortunate that I've seen quite a few different things, and I've been involved in art. And one fun fact, I guess, for you right now, and a lot of people won't know this, and even if you did some research, it'd probably be hard to find. When I was going through university, you know, I as much as I was a techie, I had a huge passion for music, and like we all do, but my passion for music went a lot further than that. I was a DJ for a long time. I had my own mobile, you know, sound show, and we used to go and do parties and, you know, weddings and you name them. And from there, we led on to actually doing a crossover music video between my sort of my background, and which is Punjabi, which is called Bhangra. And house music, which is what I was pretty much, you know, sort of brought up with, you know, whilst I was going through university. And I did this crossover track called House Bhangra. And that, believe it or not, it got ranked in the UK there's a magazine that's called the Black Echoes. So the Black Echoes used to do all the independent music that was coming out in the UK at that time. And we got into the top 40.
Oh, wow.
And we got onto TV, you know, so we were on TV. There's a very well-known newspaper in the UK called the Evening Standard. We had a review in the Evening Standard. In fact, we even got ranked on Billboard, which is the Billboard magazine. So that's a fun fact for you. But it was, you know, one of those, it was something we just did out of fun, and we really enjoyed it. But, you know, music is very close to my heart. It is something I'd love to get back into at some point. So that's just a little bit of maybe personal background for yourself. But what makes me tick, you know, otherwise, you know, I like working out. We've got a cockapoo dog, so we go for dog walks. You know, we're a first dog owner. You know, we never had a dog before this particular dog. I love cooking. Wow. You know, so I cook Indian food as well as you know, Italian and some other foods as well. But Indian food is really what I like cooking, so I love cooking as well. But these days I don't get a lot of time, you know, to do much. You know, and a lot of time we're just being focused into what we're doing because we've got a really big task ahead of us. So it's all hands to the pumps, but you do have to take time out. And the great thing about Worker and working in this way has allowed us to keep that balance, you know. And often we talk about work-life balance. It's work-life integration, really more than balance. And that's something that this way of working has definitely allowed me to do. So that's a bit about me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that. I was over a youth group years ago, and I call her, well, I just love her dearly. And she married someone from India. And I remember it was in the United States, but it was the best wedding I've ever been to, because it was like 400 people. And it was this sit down, and I was the singer. So I sang at her American portion of the wedding, right? So she had all the henna and everything else. And we were, my husband and I were sitting there, and we're all dressed to the nines, because everybody dressed to the nines, right? And so we're all kind of sitting there, and they have this food, and then they started to welcome the bride and the groom, and it was just this uproar of music, and people just jumped up and started dancing, and it was like 400 people, and my husband doesn't even love to dance, and it was just like you couldn't contain it, because it was so much fun. Oh my gosh, that was the funnest wedding I have ever been to, and the music was amazing, and everybody did this it was just amazing to have.
We do everything big. It's like a carnival, there's fireworks, there's a band coming along with the procession, everything happens.
And it's kind of, well, anyway, I just loved it, and you just brought up such a great memory with it. So anyways, I love what you're doing with Worker. I know that audience would really like to know how can they get a hold of you, Annil? What's the best way?
Always, I'm across all the different social media channels, but the best way is go and check me out on LinkedIn. Because my first name is spelled with two N's. So Annil is spelled with two N's rather than one N. It's easier to find. Otherwise, you'll get lost in all the Annils that are on LinkedIn. But check us out. We're on LinkedIn, and the company Worker, and it's WURKR. You can find us there as well. So have a look. Love to catch up and chat with anybody who's interested in us or the journey we've been on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks everybody who has listened to the Revenue Maze. We're very grateful for the audience, and we are super grateful for Annil sharing his story, his company. I'm so excited for the future of work from anywhere, especially with things like Worker. And again, thank you so much, Annil.
Thank you, Valerie. It's been really, really good. I've enjoyed this, and it's allowed me to sort of just think back in some of the things that we did in the early days. So thanks again for the opportunity. Great speaking to you. And I hope a lot of people get some good things out of this podcast.
Me too. Thanks again, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining another great episode. For show notes, links, and resources, visit revenuemaze.com. And never forget, you are why.